A very important landmark in this transformation happened in the United States. In 1918, in Pennsylvania, the American Jewish community that until then looked very suspiciously at the whole idea of Zionism, very small minority of American Jews until 1918 thought that the idea of building a Jewish state in Palestine would solve the problem of anti-Semitism. But in 1918, under the influence of the British Zionist lobby, a new body was created, the American Jewish Congress. And that Congress adopted the idea that the British have put forward through the infamous Balfour Declaration that said that actually the West, including the United States, sees the establishment of a Jewish state as fitting the values of Western civilization. Yes, they added a condition that it would not undermine or damage the interest of what they called non-Jewish minorities, as if the Jews were the majority in Palestine in 1918. There were only 10% of the population. But they said the non-Jewish minorities, namely the indigenous native people of Palestine, that their interests will not be affected. But of course, they knew that this was the only way of establishing a Jewish state was by undermining the lives and future of the indigenous people of Palestine. It meant that with this kind of alliance that developed from the beginning of the 19th century and culminated at the end of the First World War, the alliance that faced the people of Palestine, which I'm sure most of them had no idea that such an alliance was formed. How could they know that this was happening? But by 1918, already a very powerful coalition of forces was determined to turn Palestine into a Jewish state, while most of the Jews didn't want to come to Palestine, and fully understanding the implication of such a project for the people of Palestine. This was a coalition of British policymakers, American policymakers, leaders of evangelical Christianity, and other interested strategic allies. So Palestinians from the very beginning were facing a problem that had nothing to do with them, that Europe and the United States decided should be solved at their expense, knowing pretty well that this could lead to the destruction of Palestine and the Palestinians. How could they treat the Palestinians in such a way? Well, we owe a lot to the way our dear and old and deceased late friend Edward Said helped us to understand Orientalism, the way that Europe perceived Arab people, Muslim people, Christian Arabs, even Jewish Arabs, perceiving them as less equal than the Western European or American person. So that kind of Orientalism helped to dehumanize the Palestinian to the extent that when you were discussing the project of building a Jewish state in Palestine, you didn't care at all about the position, the aspiration of the people themselves. I'm not saying that everyone in the United States or everyone in Britain or in Europe disregarded the Palestinians. There were voices that from the very beginning warned the policymakers that such a project would have disastrous consequences, not only for the people of Palestine, but for the whole relationship between the United States and Europe with the Arab world. One of them was the American consul in Jerusalem, Selah Merrill, who warned the State Department that such a project would not only bring disaster to Palestine, but would turn the United States into the enemy of the Arab world and the Muslim world. And he was quite a prophet in that prediction. The moment this coalition enabled the Zionist project to begin building a Jewish state once Britain occupied Palestine in 1918, the moment this became a fact, an established fact, there was an inevitable building or process that led to the 1948 Nakba.